Michael, hey, congratulations for the change.
Thank you very much, Gig.
Hey, so let's start off with that easy question. Where the original idea came from for your sci-fi horror?
The original idea came from my love of, that weird little subgenre of horror sci-fi thriller, the Pod People movies. So I'm a big fan of Philip Kaufman's version and Abel Ferrara's version, Body Snatchers, and I'm also a fan of Don Siegel's version, the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Using those as the influence, I wanted to do a little bit of an Alex Garland approach and just do a little, genre revisionism. So I set forward on the path to do that, and we ended up writing a script that you have yet to see. The first 10 pages of that script is what became The Changed. So we already have the sequel ready to go.
Oh.
Yeah.
Do you see this film more of a sci-fi or like a horror?
I see it as a sci-fi film, a sci-fi thriller. I definitely feel like it's got that urgent sense of dread, like the other, the Body Snatcher films and many sci-fi films that sort of ride that line between tense or horror. But at the end of the day, if I were to classify it, I probably wouldn't call it a horror film. I would call it a sci-fi thriller. What about you? What would you call it?
I was looking at it more of a horror, sort of like a psychological horror type of thing.
Sure.
But that's my perspective. But then again, Body Snatchers is very similar, and that's a story that I want to say they retell that quite a bit.
Right. Yeah, we're just trying to do it a little bit differently, and hopefully people are going to enjoy our approach.
So excellent. So tell us about the setting that you wanted to do something like this, because like Body Snatchers was something that was setting in an urban environment. You went ahead and did it much more, suburbia.
Right. Yeah, I mean, having grown up in suburbia, all those many years ago, I'm sort of fascinated by how, just like an urban environment, a suburban environment is going to be a microcosm for society, especially where I'm from the Northeast in Connecticut. So, even growing up in the 70s and 80s, I, grew up with a very diverse, population with friends and just so many different people around me that I really felt like we could do the same thing in suburbia and just get a nice cross section of every socioeconomic kind of stratus and just put those characters in a setting and let them speak for themselves.
Now, this is not filmed in Connecticut, I presume, because in the film it doesn't really identify where this takes place.
Well, they do say a couple of times that they are in Connecticut, and it actually was shot in Connecticut. One of the things that I think a lot of people think about, I don't know where you're from, but many people, when they think of Connecticut, they really just think of, a picture postcard kind of winter New England setting. But, Connecticut has got, some pretty ugly parts to it as well. So I wanted to show that mixture of, the industrial landscape with all the towers and all the wires, and then also moving from those neighborhoods and out of those back roads where we have all those grids to the little suburban neighborhood where we find ourselves in the story.
Well, I'm here in California, and how I pictured Connecticut is those little small towns on rolling hills or something like that. That's how we pictured it over here on the West Coast.
Right. Yeah. Very Litchfield Hills. I mean, there are beautiful places here in Connecticut as well, but there are certainly parts of Connecticut that are probably like some of the ugliest parts of Los Angeles too.
So now the film like this, you kept it simple with one main production set, which is the house. Tell us about the seeking the house for yourself, and just out of curiosity, did this house have a basement, or do you have to come up with this different set?
We used the geography of the house pretty much as it is in the film, and yes, that was the basement. In that house, it's a tremendous house. It was one of my main collaborators and one of the top producers in the film. His name's first on the film credits, Taylor Warren. It was actually the house he grew up in. It was his dad's house, and they had since built an extension onto it. So that extension became production, where we had costumes and makeup, and we had all the different various things for the DIT stations, and even the sets that when she's at school and when we're at the office with Mac and then we're at the hospital, those are all sets we built in the garage. So we shot every little bit of it at this house in Connecticut.
Well, you surely use your resources well, then that's the case.
Thank you.
Let's talk about speaking of body snatchers. You know, we are under the assumption that you know, these are invading alien forces and so on. But I guess the true horror is not to really show the enemy, and basically it's almost portrayed like it was some kind of a virus. Tell us more about that. And doesn't this kind of hit home a little too hard?
Well, all right. So in my defense, the screenplay I mentioned earlier was written 10 years ago. So it just sort of proves that these kinds of stories can be taken and transplanted again and again and again, and they're going to resonate in a certain way based on what's going on in our culture. And I think that there were certain words like pandemic that were used in the original script, and we did omit quite a few things to not let those parallels be quite so direct, but we did decide to let it be what it is. And if people are going to draw those parallels, we figured it was going to be inevitable. So yes, and I certainly have a backstory for the virus and how that all occurred. But you know, we're going to have to wait for the next film to get those answers.
I find it how can you say the transference of you know, from one body to another body was the story was very similar to Bram Stoker's Dracula, where when he wrote it, it was the idea of spreading syphilis.
Right.
So what was that? Was that something in mind on like how it actually jumps from one person to another person for yourself?
Well, I think that you know, I was thinking about at the original time of writing it. Of course, there's always been paranoia, you know, with the AIDS epidemic and other things that have occurred in our culture, not just, you know, with recently COVID, but there's always been this strange fear of people being afraid of each other and intimacy and contact for so many different reasons. But beyond that, and whatever terrible, awful disease might be floating throughout the world at any given time, it also, you'll notice there were some religious parallels in the movie. So I might be making this up, but I do seem to recall that the idea of the kiss really did come from Catholicism and how Judas betrayed Jesus with a kiss. In fact, there's certain lines about that in the other scripts. And I really think that's really the core of where that came from, as opposed to trying to make a comment on AIDS or COVID or any other type of disease that's out there.
So tell us about the cast. Who did you recruit first? I was imagining that you kind of recruited Jason and Carlee first.
Right. I've worked with Jason and Carlee and Doug Tompos before, and a couple of other members of the cast who, you know, when you work with people and you know you can trust them and you've worked with them before, there's just a shorthand that makes that process so much easier. So it was getting Jason on board and Carlee, and once they were on board, I've worked with Kathy Cyril before, Ryan McCarthy, Maggie Champagne. And so it was really it's really nice to be at the point in my so-called career where I could just, you know, open up my phone and call people who I think are going to be right for the Doug Tompos, of course, who played Kurt. And then from there, we were able to cast Clare Foley came first, and then we were able to get Tony Todd. And both of those actors were the first and only people I wanted in those roles. So I was very lucky to get them, and even luckier that they were both an absolute delight.
You mean for both Claire and Tony, you already had like a beeline, like you already imagined them into those roles?
I already did, yeah. I mean, going back to Gotham, for Claire, and of course loving her from Sinister, and that idea, it became my first choice if it wasn't my first idea from a friend of a friend mentioned her, and somebody had a way that they could get to her, because we had a contact through her agency Paradigm at the time. And so once that was mentioned, I was like, I've got to be able to talk to this young woman, and if she's cool, I definitely want to work with her. And Tony Todd was very much the same type of process. So if you can get anybody who could it be, the investor asked me, and I said I would get Tony Todd. So we made the attempt, and here we are.
Tony Todd was such a treasure in the film like this, because he's very big in the horror community, not to mention what he had to do to his character.
Yes. Yeah, he is. What a sport, and just such a constant collaborator. I mean, did not phone it in even remotely like you might imagine some people who would show up for a film of this size just for a paycheck. Not at all. Completely invested. We had dozens of conversations before he got here, and he was, my BFF during the shoot. He would just text me all night. Oh, here's an idea, or he'd send me songs, and like just any way to relate and to talk about the characters, and also his collaboration with the other actors. I mean, just such a gentleman and such a talent.
Great. And you mentioned previously that you are already in the works for a sequel, or you're just like sort of in the incubation stage right now.
Well, I mean, the entire script is written. It would need to be revised slightly, since we, stole the first 10 pages to expand to this script. But there's been talk about it. We're going to see obviously how this film performs, and that story is much more like John Milius's Red Dawn than the movie that we have here, which is a little chamber thriller. So that budget's going to need to be significantly bigger for us to pull off. It ends up being a war zone, and they're traveling across the country in order to get to a free zone and that sort of thing. So I would love to be able to make it, but it's not impossible that it can happen. Hopefully people will see this film and people will respond to it, and we'll have some success so we can make that film.
Great. Well, there's one more thing I'm curious about, Michael, because there's quite a few kisses in the film, and I want to know was how close was Tony and Jason's kiss, and even if you considered them locking together.
Those guys, they do get very close for that one moment, and we were under the gun that day, so we went pretty quickly. But there was one take where I swear to God they did actually kiss, but that would have ruined the story, so we couldn't use that take. I think to answer your question safely, I'd say that I think both of those guys, as actors and as men, would go for it.
That is an excellent answer. Well, Michael, thank you very much for carrying this conversation about The Changed. And once again, congratulations for getting this. And, crossing our fingers, you come up with an epic sequel after this.
It was my pleasure. I hope you enjoyed the film, and it means the world to me that you wanted to talk to me today. So thanks for that.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it. Next time.
All right. Bye-bye.